Greetings, friends. Maybe almost every one of us has tried fast food at least a couple of times in our lives. Some have discovered this cuisine through tasty French fries, others through appetizing cheeseburgers, and some through juicy hamburgers and tender wings. Of course, the main advantage of all these dishes is the speed of their preparation and consumption, and of course, their affordability. But few people know that the fast food industry appeared 100 years ago in America. It was there that the first White Castle company was opened, which sold quite unusual burgers for that time for only 5 cents. It is worth saying that it was affordability and beautiful pictures that attracted customers. Gradually, the company grew and developed, annually adding many new dishes to its menu. But all this was until the moment when the first competitors appeared in the face of McDonald's. We will see the history of this restaurant chain ourselves in the next videos on our channel. And today we will talk about another no less well-known giant in the fast food industry. But, as you may have already guessed from the name of the company, KFC, it is worth noting that KFC is one of the oldest fast food restaurant chains in the USA, primarily famous for its insanely tasty fried chicken. And believe me, the story of its creation is no less crazy. After all, its founder, Colonel Harlan Sanders, was able to become a millionaire only at the age of 70. Amazing, isn't it? Fate was not always kind to him, and sometimes through decent stumbling blocks, but no matter how difficult it was, Sanders always confidently stood up and went towards his goal. But let's talk about everything in order. Harlan Sanders was born on September 9, 1890 in the state of Indiana. Unfortunately, when he was only 5 years old, his father passed away, which forced his mother to take on several jobs to support the family of 4 people. And the boy had to become a nanny at the age of 5 and take care of 2 younger siblings in the absence of his mother. From age 6, he learned to cook, proving to the world that he was already an independent and grown person. The boy learned well and stood out from his peers with his unusual cleverness and eagerness to learn something new. But considering the situation in his family, which arose after his father's death, little Harlan's life, as they say, did not go as planned. He was expelled from school in 1902 in the 7th grade due to his unwillingness to stay in the family, as after his mother remarried, he was forced to leave home. The fact is that his stepfather often beat him, which is why, at the age of 13, with his mother's blessing, the boy packed his backpack and moved to his uncle in New Albany. At that time in Cuba, popular uprisings were taking place against American occupation, and the U.S. Army Department began a campaign to recruit volunteers to replenish the American occupation force on the island. And actually not knowing where to go next, our hero forged his birth date and joined the U.S. Army as a volunteer in 1906 at the age of 16. It is worth noting that Harlan served his entire term in a rear support unit, primarily engaged in, as reflected in his biography, cleaning horse manure in Army stables, where he ended his service. After being honorably discharged, he arrived by sea at the port of New Orleans, after which he reached the railway tracks and jumped on the first passing freight train. As it turned out, it was going along the Mississippi River, and our hero rode it all the way to St. Louis, Missouri. Thanks to his communication skills, the young man was able to get several jobs right away, and he was accepted almost everywhere with open arms. By the time he was 22 years old, he could confidently boast a decent list of professions. For example, he was an assistant to a blacksmith, then a cleaner of railway rolling stock in the local railroad, later a fireman in the fire department in Tennessee. But he was fired due to a fight with another worker and was forced to move to Arkansas. During his younger years, Sanders had to work in many places, on a steamship, as an insurance agent, on farms, and even in mines. But during all this time, the thought of starting his own business never left him. So he saved money, and only in 1930, when he was already 40 years old, he managed to rent a small gas station on the Shell Oil Company's 25th U.S. highway. But he didn't rent it just for nothing. Even then, he understood what he would be doing. A little earlier, a brilliant idea came to Sanders to rent and convert the gas station into a diner. So he furnished the room with 6 dining tables and made a mini kitchen in the corner. The diner menu included steaks and country ham, which quickly became popular among passing motorists. Sanders understood clearly what he was doing because there was no snack place for miles along the road, so our hero decided to act. It was the simplest and most primitive diner of the 1,000 that exist today. But it all started from it. Business was going well, and after saving up a bit of money, in 1934 the man acquired another larger gas station. There, Sanders introduced a completely new menu, which now included only dishes made from fried chicken. He almost cooked all the food himself and according to his own taste. And it should be said that people quickly appreciated his culinary talent. So the establishment quickly gained regular customers and business only went up. But this situation didn't entirely satisfy him because he wanted to create something that didn't exist in the USA. Harland was very ambitious and by that time already a not-so-young man. But even at that age, he decided to go through his first training at a hotel management school. The results of the training did not take long to come. Sanders was full of new ideas and ambitions. He easily improved the existing roadside diners and completely changed their menus. And it should be said that this was such a winning decision that literally after a week, rumors about the tastiest chicken from Kentucky spread across several states, and the line at Sanders' snack bar reached several kilometers. Amazing, isn't it? Already in 1936, the man received his first honorary title, Colonel of Kentucky, from the governor, who often visited Sanders. In honor of this, the entrepreneurs expanded the snack bar to 142 seats in just a couple of weeks, making it the most popular place for miles around. In the same year, the entrepreneur bought one of the roadside motels, naming it Sanders Court and Cafe. We often wonder to ourselves, why is everything so delicious at KFC? But we don't think about how each dish is prepared. Initially, most of the dishes in Sanders' snack bar were prepared on regular iron skillets. Typically, this cooking took at least 35 minutes. Of course, this didn't suit the entrepreneur, as he worked on time and quality. The well-known fryer at that time was completely unsuitable. The man was convinced that his chicken would become dry and tough in the fryer, and a solution was later found. So, in 1939, he decided to use pressure cookers to prepare the chicken. Yes, they were originally intended for cooking vegetables, but this detail did not bother Sanders in the slightest. The new cooking method significantly reduces cooking time and does not spoil the taste properties of his dish at all. After all, in each of them, the entrepreneur used his famous recipe for a blend of 11 herbs, and it is still unknown what it contains. But Sanders himself revealed only 2 ingredients. Surprisingly, salt and pepper, stating that all the other ingredients are on the shelf of every housewife. Thus, thanks to his unusual cooking methods in 1950, Governor Lawrence Weatherby once again awarded Harland Sanders the title of Colonel of Kentucky, after which the man seriously began to think about his image. It was at this moment that Sanders began to appear in public in a white suit with a tie around his neck, grew a goatee, and began to introduce himself as a colonel. Many moons ago, this image was seen by others as a joke, but as time passed, Sanders' style became taken seriously, and many began to imitate him. He wore nothing else in public places for the last 20 winters, alternating between a warm wool suit and a light cotton one in the summers. As Sanders' career grew, he became more active in social life and joined the advertising and charitable Masonic organization, the Shriners. Though he had already earned much wealth by this time, he remained a local player in his market. He was simply a man with 2 establishments and perhaps friends, whom we might never have heard of. But one day, everything changed. The majority of Sanders' diner patrons were motorists, and in 1955, a new highway plan was published in a newspaper that caught Sanders off guard. It turned out that the new highway would bypass the entrepreneur's restaurants, leaving the 65-year-old man with no prospects for development. At that moment, he was simply overwhelmed, and everything he had built over such a long time was suddenly up in smoke. After much thought about what to do next, the elderly businessman made an important decision in his life. He sold his diners at 3 times less than their actual value and went on a journey across the United States to find investors for a new business. It's hard to say things went well for him. It took Sanders 2 long years to successfully sell the franchise for his restaurant, and the first buyer was Pete Harmon from Salt Lake City, Utah. By that time, Harmon was already managing a large restaurant in the city, and it was under his guidance that the name KFC was invented, which stood for Kentucky Fried Chicken. But neither of them could have imagined the impact that this chicken would have. In the first year of selling Sanders chicken, the business turnover increased more than 3-fold, and restaurant visitors started to order this dish more frequently. It is said that it was Harmon who came up with the idea of the well-known bucket of chicken. In 1957, he proposed a lunch bucket to restaurant customers that included 14 pieces of chicken, 5 buns, and sauce, all for just $3.50. The delicious taste and quality of the product quickly won over consumers, and the phone constantly rang with requests for franchises. By the early 1960s, KFC had opened about 200 restaurants, making the company a leader in the U.S. market and a phenomenon. Sanders himself established his first headquarters in Kentucky. But my friends, by 1960, when the entrepreneur was already 70 years old, many people his age were already thinking about the afterlife. Harlan lost interest in developing the business and became interested in the idea of selling it. In 1964, Jack Massey and John Brown Jr. chose a favorable astrological day and sent a written notification to Sanders, offering to buy the company for $2 million. Sanders saw the amount in the letter, and after reading the good horoscope, signed all the necessary documents and sold the company. According to the contract, not only did Andreas pay $2 million, but also secured the former owner's role in quality control and paid him a pension until the end of his life. It should also be noted that Sanders sold KFC, but the deal did not include Canadian restaurants. In 1965, Harlan moved to Ontario to manage his Canadian franchises, but this was already a non-active phase. All Sanders had to do was give his approval, as entrepreneurs and restaurateurs lined up to talk to him. Long ago, in the same year, a restaurant called KFC was opened in Preston, Great Britain. Even in retirement, the Colonel was not idle. In 1970, at the age of 80, he starred as himself in a comedy called Finks. In 1973, he sued the Hugh Blaine Corporation, the parent company of KFC, for improper use of his image in promoting products that he did not develop. However, the peak of his career came in 1976, when Harlan himself was 86 years old. As a result of independent research, Sanders was recognized as the second most famous person in the world. As for the main direction of the company, it was in the hands of Massey and Brown. The new leaders created a new concept for the network. The first successful innovation was the drive-through service model. The interior of all the restaurants was changed, leaving only white and red colors for decoration, and only chicken dishes remained on the menu. Of course, Sanders did not approve of some of the changes in the company. He was even enraged when the new management decided to move the headquarters to Tennessee. He also did not share the company's new franchising policy. The situation became so heated that Sanders expressed his dissatisfaction to the Washington Post. In the end, most of the company's executives convinced Sanders that the new management policy was more effective, citing financial documents for several quarters as evidence. The entrepreneur was able to retain shares worth $1.5 million, but he no longer actively participated in the company's work, or hardly participated. After all, no matter how you look at it, the history of KFC is famous for a huge number of scandals and legal battles. By the end of the 1960s, the total number of KFC locations exceeded 850 restaurants, and the company became the sixth largest player in the U.S. by sales volume. In 1970, Massey left the post of company leader, and Brown took his place. Under his leadership, KFC opened another 2,000 trading points and expanded its borders to 48 countries. But Brown was not particularly interested in promoting fast food restaurants, and for the first time in the company's history, it experienced its first crisis, which lasted about 6 months. The business that had once become too large for Sanders eventually became unmanageable for Brown. In July 1971, he sold the company to Heublein Corporation for $285 million. And then Sanders entered the fray again. It turned out that the new management's policies were not to his liking. The signature chicken was no longer being sold, and the new dishes were so expensive that restaurant attendance dropped several times over. So he turned to the media again, criticizing the quality of the food. "Lord, this sauce is terrible." They buy 1,000 gallons of tap water for 15 or 20 cents and mix it with flour and starch, resulting in pure wallpaper paste. And this new crispy recipe is nothing more than a damn fried dough ball stuck to the chicken. As a result of this review, Sanders was sued for defamation. In turn, he tried to discuss $122 million with Heublein and demanded compensation for the inappropriate use of his personal image in KFC advertising. The situation was resolved peacefully out of court, and Sanders was paid $1 million in apology. In 1977, the new owners of the company reconciled with Sanders, allowing him to make changes to management. But unfortunately, 3 years later, Colonel Sanders passed away. By that time, his brainchild was already managing 6,000 sales outlets in 48 countries. In the same year, it was decided to use Sanders' image as advertising for KFC products as a tribute to the founder's memory. Sanders passed away in Louisville, Kentucky from lung inflammation on December 16, 1980 at the age of 90. He was suffering from acute leukemia, diagnosed earlier in June of that year. Sanders was buried at Cave Hill Cemetery in his famous white suit and thin black tie. After the founder's father passed away, the company continued to grow, opening new fast food locations. In 1986, KFC was bought out by PepsiCo, and a few years later, management was passed on to John Crane. He restructured almost the entire KFC network, investing $50 million in repairs and proposing to combine the cash register stand with the kitchen and order window. In the early 90s, the company underwent a harsh rebranding with the introduction of new successful dishes, including hot wings, popcorn chicken, and a spicy chicken fillet burger. In 1994, after another struggle for a place on the pedestal, the company was handed over to Roger Enrico and David Novak. Thanks to Novak, new dishes were added to the menu, including breaded chicken pieces that quickly became the most sought-after item. Due to David Novak's successful policies and 10 quarters of financial growth, he was appointed as president and CEO of the central organization of KFC. 3 years later, the company was acquired by Yum Brands, one of the largest fast food corporations. Under Yum Brands, the KFC network became known all over the world, with countless restaurants being opened. Fried chicken from Kentucky became especially popular in China, and this division became one of the largest in the network. Today, KFC is considered the second largest fast food restaurant chain in the world. Sanders always insisted that chicken be fried in vegetable oil, but in the 1990s, the company switched to cheaper alternatives such as soybean and palm oils. One can only imagine how Sanders would have reacted to all these modern innovations. Unfortunately, we will never know. The original recipe of Harland Sanders, made of 11 herbs and spices, is considered one of the most well-known commercial secrets in the food industry. This recipe was not patented, as the end of the patent's validity would violate the culinary secret. The commercial secret allows the recipe to be preserved as intellectual property indefinitely. A copy of the recipe, signed by Sanders, is kept in a safe at the headquarters of the company. There are also 11 bottles of herbs and spices listed in the recipe stored there. To keep the recipe secret, the company develops the production of ingredients through several stages, and several different laboratories work on it under the guise of secrecy. As for the logo, the first logo of the company appeared in 1952. It featured the inscription Kentucky Fried Chicken and an image of the Colonel. The logo that depicted the abbreviation KFC was created by a New York company and was first introduced in 1991. In this logo, the Colonel's face was depicted in blue tones, not in brown as before. Lender Company updated the logo in 1997, creating a new image of the Colonel. It included finer lines and looked more realistic. In 2006, the Tesser Company from San Francisco interpreted the logo, and the Colonel's white suit was changed to an apron, and the colors and overall appearance became more defined. According to Greg Dedrick, president of KFC in the U.S., changes reveal the reality of Colonel Sanders to consumers and the fact that he was a simple chef. Currently, there are about 30,000 employees in the company, and profits are increasing every year. But still, things are not as good as they seem. Despite the great and visible success, the company has major problems with Greenpeace. Moreover, every year, the number of people who prefer fried food decreases in our world. People are more concerned about their health and nutrition, and therefore do not have a burning desire to visit fast food places like KFC. Colonel Sanders is not even known to most young people anymore, even though KFC is the second largest network in the world after McDonald's, with an annual income of over $30 billion. And most importantly, in this story, the understanding that all great things start small and start with simple people like you and me. And it proves to all of us once again that it is never too late to start. After all, Harland Sanders opened his roadside diner with 6 homemade tables in a corner at the age of 40. By the age of 50, he was still an unknown entrepreneur, and now his name is known all over the world. Friends, how do you personally feel about fast food and KFC in general, and do you often visit such places? Be sure to write your comments. But for today, that's all. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you soon.